help me reach 1,000 subscribers. When I walked down the aisle, I believed I had found someone who would weather every storm by my side. Our life together was modest, nothing flashy, but built on what I thought were firm foundations. Trust, love, loyalty. For years I poured myself into that vision, making sacrifices I told myself were for our shared future. She would tell me she was proud of me, and I leaned on that. I never imagined those words would grow hollow. Small things began to shift. Nights out stretched longer with excuses about meeting friends. Her phone, once ordinary, became private in a way that made me uneasy. She kept her distance at night, a little colder than before. I dismissed the worry at first. Suspicion can ruin relationships, and I didn't want to be the one to poison ours. But the oddness increased, and a heaviness settled in my gut. One evening she returned home unusually distracted and profusely affectionate, like someone trying to mask something. When I asked about her day, she answered in fragments. I stayed quiet, watching and listening. My instincts, the same ones I had trusted before, said something was wrong. The truth arrived like a blow I didn't see coming. Through a friend I discovered she wasn't meeting just one man. There were several. Each new detail felt like a hand twisting inside my chest. The woman I shared a home with, the one I thought I knew, was quietly giving pieces of her heart to others. I didn't confront her at once. Instead I watched, waiting to see how far this deception would go. Not long after, she announced she was pregnant. The news should have filled me with joy, but all it stirred was suspicion. Memories of whispered meetings and furtive texts replayed in my mind. When she said with practiced certainty, "This is your baby," the words didn't land as a blessing, they landed like an accusation. It felt like a trap designed to bind me to something I had no confidence belonged to me. Her confidence, bordering on entitlement, only hardened my resolve. I would not be compelled to raise another man's child under the weight of her lies. I kept my voice calm. I didn't give her the spectacle she might have expected. Instead, I quietly gathered proof. I collected call logs, screenshots, and statements from people who had seen them together. Each piece of evidence was a small, painful confirmation of what my intuition had been telling me. But with each discovery I felt a strange clarity. The fog of betrayal lifted enough to show a path forward. When I chose to confront her, I laid everything out with surgical calm. I spread the messages and records on the table and watched the color drain from her face. Her hands trembled. Excuses tumbled out, flustered and weak. She broke down and admitted to the affairs, but even then insisted the child was mine. By then her words had no weight. I had seen the pattern. I had watched how she moved through her double life. Her pleas and tears felt like rehearsed lines from someone who had had practice at manipulation. I told her plainly that I could not, in good conscience, raise a child birthed from her betrayal. I told her the marriage was over. There was no yelling, only the steady closing of a chapter one had tried for so long to save. Watching her realize that her scheme had not shackled me but instead had been the instrument of its own destruction, that was the first taste of the retribution I never intended to savor, but which nonetheless felt just. I filed for divorce, presenting the evidence I had collected. In the eyes of family, friends, and in the legal arena, the image she had carefully cultivated disintegrated. People who had once praised her now looked at her with disappointment and disbelief. The pregnancy she had thought would secure her control became the very thing that exposed her. Instead of ensnaring me, it liberated me. The burden she tried to foist upon me turned into the unmasking of her true character. I walked away not with triumphant shouts, but with my dignity intact. I didn't gloat. Revenge in my mind wasn't about cruelty or spectacle. It was about truth doing the work I could no longer trust her to do herself. By refusing to be manipulated, by insisting on accountability, I let the consequences of her choices unfold in the light. That, more than any dramatic confrontation, felt like justice. Life after the divorce was far from effortless. Healing never is. There were nights filled with emptiness and mornings where the quiet felt both terrifying and necessary. Slowly, though, I began to rebuild. I stitched myself back together piece by piece, learning how to trust the parts of me that remained whole. The wound she left would always be part of my story, a scar that reminded me of what had been broken. But it also reminded me of something else. The value of self-respect and the power of standing firm. Her betrayal gave me a lesson I would have preferred to learn differently. Trust, once fractured, rarely returns to its former shape. I chose not to be the man who swallowed deceit for the sake of appearances. I chose a harder path that ultimately led me away from a life built on falsehoods. In the end, her attempts to trap me with a lie turned into the instrument of her undoing, and into my release. I moved forward, carrying the ache but also a steadier sense of who I was and what I would not allow again.